Hey guys, welcome to the number one podcast in all of the world, particularly in Australia and combat sports in general. Let's talk about Rob Font versus Cody Garbrandt.
Cody No Chin is gone.
Yeah,
It's so weird that everyone who's getting knocked out in 2021 but not Cody Garbrandt.
I mean, he's taken a bit of time off, and to be honest, before he fought TJ, he was still undefeated.
Yeah.
And then
in the UFC.
No, I'm pretty sure
He lost outside of the
Oh
UFC.
yeah, sorry, yes, in the
He was
UFC, yes.
undefeated before
He was
that.
undefeated in the UFC, yes. And then after his two losses to TJ, then he became very emotional in the scrap. And as soon as he saw like he created a little bit of damage and he'd rocked someone and wobbled them, he'd go into the kill and get caught himself, and that's what happened with Pedro Munoz. And a lot of people weren't too sure how he was going to rebound after that when he was fighting Rafael Sanzao. To be fair, that KO was very spectacular, but it wasn't the most refined KO because it was very much just swinging as hard as you can and
From the fence, pretty
from
much.
the fence and catching a Sanzao in the last couple of seconds, right?
Yeah.
But
it was a phenomenal knockout.
it was a phenomenal knockout, but it was very dangerous because to go crouch that low and come off the fence, it would have been quite easy for a Sanzao just to go for a knee or a teep, and it would just smacked him in the face.
Mm-hmm.
But phenomenal KO in itself, and then he's had a little bit of time off again. I think it's the space of time that he's been taking off that's improved his chin.
Yeah.
A lot of people have said, it goes to show if you grow out your beard, you can take shots better. I don't. Yeah. Well, it's definitely not due to that, but the time off, the period of time he's had off in between these, because having like 3 KOs back to back, that's got to reduce your chin. That's something that's a very limited supply of how much damage you can take, regardless of how many fights you've had in the past and how young you are.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, Cody's very, very young. Very, very, very young. And it goes to show that he's still got room to improve and has made leaps and bounds of improvement because he fought very well against Rob Font. But I did say in our prediction that Rob Font was going to beat him. I did actually think Rob Font was going to KO him, maybe walk into a right hand. I'm pretty sure Rob Font expected the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
But that jab was just so good.
Yeah, I think the jab was what made Rob so good. I mean, even at the start, they said his game plan was to use his crispy jab. He even had Calvin Kattar in his corner.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing
They're both from the New England cartel.
There you go. And then one thing that was really impressive, though, from Cody was his wrestling. Rob didn't really have really good takedown defense. Cody took him down pretty easily for quite a few times.
Yeah, there wasn't much resistance, to be honest.
Yeah, but the way that Rob sort of figured out was that he noticed that Cody was trying to draw him back to the cage.
Mm.
There were times where you could see Cody actually, you can actually see Cody like backing up against the cage and putting his hand against the cage like he was doing in his previous fight. But one thing that was still really, really good was Cody's got really, really good evasive boxing. There was
head movements very good, just very fast.
There was definitely some of that old school Cody Garbrandt, evasive boxing, because there were times where Rob was just swinging at him and he was actually dodging. He was doing really well, but he just didn't have something to counter that jab, and it was such a frustrating fight for me to watch as well.
Cody almost looked. A lot of people said, he looked less emotional, but I thought he was just a different emotion. It was less angry and like that furious kind of Cody Garbrandt. He looked a little bit scared.
Yeah.
He looked a bit scared of the firefight, and a lot of people have been telling him to like not get emotional and get into these situations where they're trading for shots, and then it's whoever's chin holds up, and in the past Cody's chin hasn't held up. And he's lost those firefights, even though he particularly has way more power than them. He almost looked a little bit scared to throw full combinations, Really good movement. Really, really good movement, moving around on his feet, in and out of range. His head movement was incredible. it looked like when he was taking down Rob, he wasn't really doing any significant damage. There was one point where there was a little bit of a scramble, and Rob was actually going to go for a Kimura.
Yeah.
And then Cody actually, because he tucked it in so he couldn't get, pulled across his back. But then he actually managed to flip and reverse it. And then after the scramble, they got back up.
Yeah.
So in terms of Rob Font's, jiu-jitsu, it's very good.
It's very good.
Takedown defense, didn't really put up much of a fight until the later rounds where Cody had a little bit less energy.
Yeah.
First and last round were probably the closest,
that last
closest.
Round was definitely a slugfest. It was that I thought someone was going to get knocked down in that last round.
The first round particularly, though, a lot of people weren't too sure. I still counted it to Font because in that first round, Garbrandt still got rocked.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he even taken down Font, we talk about if takedowns, if you've got strikes and then you've got significant strikes, then you've got takedowns and you've got significant takedowns.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take someone down and you don't advance position, you stay in full guard, you don't even get to half guard or side control, and they quite easily get up. Well, and you don't really get any significant strikes yourself and ground the pound. Can it really be that significant? Probably not. It's probably more of a waste of energy, if anything. So in terms of that, I felt Rob Font still won the first round, and I think Rob just dominated Cody. I think he dominated Cody from round 1 to 5.
Yeah.
Looked like Cody was a lot more active in 1 and 5, but 2, 3, and 4 just looked
like he just couldn't seem to get himself going or confident enough.
But that's the power of the jab. That's the power of the jab, though.
And he was just, I feel like he was just worried about getting knocked out. One thing that I thought that might be I was sort of giving thought to this morning was we put up a post recently on Instagram about a wave of cuts that are going through the UFC right now. Didn't they cut 9 fighters or something last week?
Cut 9 fighters.
9 fighters. And Jacare Souza was also cut as well.
That was not part of the 9. It was a separate 9.
That was separate.
These were all outside. I believe they were outside the top 15.
There you go.
Jacare was actually in the top 15.
There you go.
But he got cut because he'd been losing a considerable amount of fights.
Yeah. It's just I think that because Cody had got knocked out 3 times in a row. His last 4 of his last 5 now set 5 fights. He kind of felt like, I must be thinking to myself, if I lose this by knockout, he's probably gone. And the second thing that was on my mind was the fact that this man went through so much adversity. He had COVID, and it was a really bad case of COVID. His family had COVID. He tried to train with COVID, and he said he felt so lethargic, and started coughing up blood, and he was on all this medication and isolation.
Issue with his bicep as well.
That was the second thing. He'd just gone through so much just to get there, I felt like, what if that fight would have been a little bit different if he hadn't gone through that? What if he kept going,
Yeah, maybe. I think, because
this is all in the space of 1 year.
I mean, we typically Cody's cardio is pretty good. If you look against his fight against Dominic Cruz, that's probably his best performance, and he's very active in that fight, especially with head movement, footwork, things that typically do consume a lot of energy very quickly. And that was across 5 rounds against one of the best people in the UFC, if not the bantamweight division, particularly for footwork and movement. And his cardio was fine. However, it looked like he was struggling a little bit in those later rounds, and that could have been perhaps some damage from COVID. I don't know if it caused any lasting issues. The reason why I bring up the cardio is Rob Font actually outstruck him by a large margin. So particularly on the numbers, 183 strikes, Rob through 176 landed, which were significant. 78 by Cody Garbrandt and 63 significant strikes. So in terms of significant strikes, Rob Font had 3 times as much volume, and yet he could keep going. And I think it was just the power of such a crisp jab. I know in the lead up, Cody was actually asked, everyone's been talking about, he's got such a good jab and it's going to be a huge factor in this fight. And he said, well, I'd rather have, a powerful right hand that can knock someone out than, a fast jab. And in my head, I was like, But he's an amateur boxer, like with a really good record of 32-1. Surely he knows that the jab is what dictates the fight.
Mm.
You know the nice strong right, yeah, that ends the fight. But what controls the fight is a really good jab, and we start to see that more and more now. You know, with Kamaru Usman, his jab has got really really better, and even knocked out Gilbert Burns with just a jab. So yeah, I don't think it's everyone's very quickly to get back on the bandwagon of, Cody, is washed up and things like that. And I don't think he's washed up.
Nah,
I
think he's still got a lot left in him.
He's very, very young.
Yeah,
but
he's only 29.
He's only 29, and Rob Font, I think 33, so he's in his prime.
Yeah.
What I think it's interesting though is Cody has talked a lot about moving to 125.
I don't want to see that happen.
I do.
Really?
Because he's actually said that he knows a lot of 125ers that are actually bigger than him, that are able to cut down to 125 and have really good performances, and they walk around heavier than Cody. Cody is actually quite light for a bantamweight. So he walks around at maybe like 143.
Well, he was supposed to fight Davison Figueroa, but that fight fell
through COVID and bicep injury. Yeah. But the thing with Cody is, I think what you want to do is compare him with TJ, fellow teammates, and TJ tried to do the whole thing, moving down to 125. He even had to use EPO in order to, get down there anyway. That's his excuse anyway. But TJ, if you look at him now, he's a big bantamweight. He is a huge bantamweight. He's shredded, but if you look at the pictures of him in the training lab, he's massive.
Yeah.
He's as big as Michael Chandler, who's a 155er. Right? If you look at them side by side, have you seen them side by side in the training lab training?
No, but I know that to get to flyweight, he pretty much nearly fucking killed himself.
Yeah, well,
it was probably one of the most craziest weight cuts ever.
Definitely, but I think if you compare him to Cody, and Cody is much lighter than TJ, and he doesn't get very heavy. He doesn't get very heavy in between camps and things like that. He stays pretty light. I would suggest Cody could move down to 125. And another very interesting bit of news is Sean actually put out a tweet after Cody lost and said, guess what I'm thinking? Which means he's insinuating that he should fight Cody because they've had a little bit of back and forth. And that could perhaps be how Sean O'Malley infiltrates the rankings, because Sean O'Malley is currently unranked.
Oh, that would be nice. They definitely did have a bit of back and forth, and Sean O'Malley, does he have a fight booked?
He does.
Yeah. Well, you know what else I wanted to see, maybe? Jake Paul versus Cody Garbrandt, because Jake Paul put out a tweet afterwards saying, I don't know what's worse, watching Cody losing your fight or not being able to ride the roller coasters on Disneyland, because obviously it's insinuating that Cody Garbrandt, he's 5'7", and then Cody responded with roller coast these nuts.
The thing, that I don't understand that though, because Jake is like 205, 210.
Yeah. And
he's literally talking shit to a guy that's 70 pounds less than him and has no chance of fighting him.
Yeah, I honestly think that Cody Garbrandt could, if he fought Jake Paul, I would love to see him just wreck him.
Definitely a height and size disadvantage for him, but
I bet my house on Cody.
Would ya?
Yeah, I bet my house on Cody.
I fucking wouldn't. I wouldn't.
I would. I don't know. We got a feeling.
I think Cody is amazing. I think his head movement is insane. And obviously really good amateur background, 32-1. But to be honest,
I mean, I don't have a house, but I still bet it. I still place a bet on him.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet the house on him, but I'd do a small little fiver or tenner. But I wouldn't. I wouldn't do too much because
put my savings on it pretty much.
Okay, don't do that. Don't do that, because the 70 pounds is 70 pounds, dude. Yeah,